Good afternoon, Senator Schumer. My name is Amy Rama. I'm a nurse practitioner and I'm a doctor of nursing practice student at the University of Rochester.
Oh, very nice to meet you,
Nice to meet you
Amy. And
as
you
well.
can call me Chuck.
Okay, Chuck, thank you. Well, today I come to your office because I wanted to discuss an issue that's very important to me, and that is about commercial truck driver fatigue. So I started searching the literature about truck driver fatigue because I work in sleep medicine and this is something that's very important to me. Basically, what I found is that up to 50% of commercial truck drivers are at risk for having a sleep disorder, specifically sleep apnea, which, as we know, is very treatable. Sleep apnea, in case you don't know, is a condition that occurs at night when a person is asleep and basically is characterized by periodic collapses in the airway during sleep, which results in frequent awakenings through the night. These awakenings are very brief, just a couple seconds, 5 or 10 seconds, nothing that the person would ever be aware of the next day or anybody would ever notice. And as a consequence, people who have sleep apnea, really any degree of sleep apnea, can have daytime sleepiness as a consequence of sleep apnea because their sleep is so fragmented at night. So people who are at risk for having sleep apnea are people who are overweight or obese and people who have a broad neck, as well as people who have what's called a crowded oral pharynx, which is the anatomy of the back of the throat. It means all those tissues back there, those sort of floppy pink tissues are all really close together. Truck drivers are especially at risk for having sleep apnea because they tend to be overweight or obese due to a sedentary lifestyle, as well as poor food choices on the road. And as a result, they tend to have a broader neck. So again, resulting in greater increase in sleep apnea. Sleep apnea can be diagnosed now very simply with home sleep test equipment. Home sleep testing is risk-free, basically. It's easy and it's convenient and it's covered by most insurance plans. Home sleep testing can be done at home. So for a truck driver population where they tend to be away from home quite a bit on the road, maybe they don't want to spend another night away from home in a sleep lab, although certainly in-lab sleep testing is still considered the gold standard for for diagnosis of sleep apnea. With insurance changes, that's becoming less and less likely, whereas home sleep testing is approved by most plans. So it can be simply done at home with the home sleep test equipment, and this screens or diagnoses sleep apnea. My concern is because up to 50% of truck drivers are at risk for having sleep apnea, a third of truck drivers have admitted to falling asleep behind the wheel, driving at highway speeds, which means speeds greater than 55 miles per hour. And truck drivers have the third highest fatality of all of all careers. So, meaning putting everybody on the road at risk. So, not only themselves, obviously, with these large trucks, putting all of us who drive at risk for car accidents.
Oh, I can appreciate that. I've lived in Brooklyn, downstate all my life, and boy, there's a lot of congestion,
Traffic,
a lot
right?
of traffic.
Yep,
So I appreciate
absolutely.
that.
So you appreciate that. A lot going on with that, and that could be any commercial truck driver. Specifically, my concern is with commercial truck drivers, but this could be drivers of big trucks, the 18-wheelers, drivers of box trucks. All of those people all have commercial driver's licenses. So with that, because of the risk associated with sleep apnea, and it's very easily diagnosed and also very easily treated, as it turns out. The current gold standard for treatment of sleep apnea is what's called CPAP. And if you're not familiar with that, it's called continuous positive airway pressure, or CPAP, or CPAP for short. CPAP basically is a machine where the person who's using it wears a mask, either on their nose or underneath their nose, and they just wear it at night. That's the only time it's needed. That's the only time sleep apnea is a problem. And what happens is this air is pressurized and it is delivered to the back of the throat, and it keeps the airway open. So it prevents these tissues from collapsing on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
What's great about CPAP is that it works. It's effective 100% of the time. As long as the person's using it, it works. It's safe. And although it does take some acclimating too. So it takes about a month on average, but most people will end up doing very well. And what motivates people to use CPAP is that they sleep a lot better and they feel a lot better. And often in my practice, because I do work in sleep medicine, I have patients who come back for a follow-up visit and say they're doing great. I wish I'd done this years ago. So, and it's also trackable. So the machine itself holds up to a year of data, including usage data, which would be important for this population, because how do we know they're being compliant with their treatment?
Mhm.
Well, that's tracking their CPAP compliance. There's an SD card, data card in the back of the CPAPs that we can what's called download through our software to take a look at usage, as well as any residual apneas and any significant leaking from the mask. So it really provides us a lot of data.
Mhm.
Now, how I would foresee this being done is through the truck driver's occupational health provider. So all truck drivers who hold a commercial license must have an occupational health provider who assesses them and determines if they're medically fit to drive. One factor is that often is concerning is, of course, sleep apnea, because truck drivers are concerned that this is a disqualifying event for their license. But in fact, through the Federal Carrier Motor Safety Administration, although it is, truck drivers can be granted a temporary license until they have been diagnosed or not diagnosed with sleep apnea, meaning gone through testing for diagnosis, and they've been treated for at least a month. So I believe it's a 3-month temporary license that they receive, and then are allowed, once the screening has taken place, once the treatment has taken place, to go ahead and regain full licensure. So really no need for concern as long as the person is compliant with their CPAP, again, if they do have sleep apnea. And the research that I have seen shows that treating sleep apnea can save up to $11 billion annually. Now, with savings in money, that means savings from car accidents, which are costly, especially if there's a fatality involved.
Absolutely.
But, right, and of course, legal fees, healthcare costs, hospitalizations, loss of licensure certainly can cost the driver his or her career, their job. And the medical bills, as well as 980 lives a year. So 980 lives a year could be saved through passing legislation or a bill that would require screening and diagnosing and treatment of sleep apnea. And I know in the past, as I looked through your record, I did see that you were involved in helping to update the Driver Fatigue Prevention Act. So I know that this is something that you sponsored, a bill that you sponsored. So I know that this is something that you have addressed before, and that was in 2013.
Yep, at that 113th Congress, I spoke about it twice.
Right, so an important issue for you. And although that's not one that's directly involved with commercial truck drivers, but driver fatigue is something that you have addressed in the past. And then the other thing I know was a bill, HR 395, that you didn't sponsor, but you did vote for, which involves having the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, which is the governing body under the DOT or the Department of Transportation that does guidelines for commercial truck drivers. You did vote for the bill that requires a rulemaking process for any requirement in screening, diagnosing, and testing of truck drivers. So again, and that was in 2013 as well, and signed into law by President Obama in October of 2013. So again, something that is at the forefront, although again doesn't specifically apply to my issue directly. It does say, that this is something that's on the agenda. That bill specifically wants the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration to have a rulemaking process instead of just a guideline for truck drivers. So what I'm suggesting is a rule that requires at-risk, again, meaning a truck driver who is obese or overweight, somebody with a broad neck, and somebody with a crowded oral pharynx, which again is very easily assessed by the occupational health provider, to be screened for sleep apnea. Again, that could be in-lab sleep testing, where somebody actually comes into the sleep lab for the night, spends the night with electrodes on. Risk-free test, easy test, does require a night away from home, so maybe not ideal and not always covered by insurance at this point. But home sleep testing is, again, very easy to operate and use. Just one night of data is all that's required. And once that is obtained, if the person does in fact have some form of sleep apnea, whether it's mild, moderate, or severe, sleep apnea is characterized based on how many times per hour the changes in breathing happen. So again, any form of sleep apnea that the driver is treated with CPAP and compliance can be assessed annually. So whereas the person goes to see their occupational health provider every year, they can also see their sleep provider for a quick 20-minute follow-up visit to assess their compliance and their usage and any issues with their CPAP or their mask on an ongoing basis to make sure they're optimally treated for this and that they're safe on the road as well.
Oh, it sounds like you really thought through this. Thank you for looking up the prior legislations that I've looked at. as you know, just like that driver fatigue bill that I put through last year in 13, you know, we tried to go through, but it didn't, it got vetoed. And some of these things can be very difficult. So, did you bring some things with you today that you could leave with me?
I did. In fact, I brought a one-page paper that basically bullet points the problem as well as possible solutions in the current legislation. And I also have a paper that is from the National Sleep Foundation that talks about the risks of drowsy driving. And in fact, there is a section in here about commercial drivers, drowsy, who are especially at risk for sleep disorder. So I'd like to leave both of those with you. The
absolutely.
one-page paper that I created also has my contact information, so please feel free to
excellent.
email me or call me with any questions or concerns that you have about this, and I will leave those both with you today.
No, it sounds great. Let me look through this, and then when I'll have one of my advisors probably get a hold of you if we need to bring you back or get more information. Can't make any promises, but it is an impetus off the previous work that I've done. So I thank you for meeting with me
Great.
today.
Thank you so much.
You know, we look forward to nurses that are doing the doctor work, such as yourself, coming into our office. So keep up the work that you're doing, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you so much, Chuck.
All
I
right.
appreciate your
Thank you.
time. Thank
Have
you
a
for
great
meeting with
day.
me. Thank you. Do the same.